Spectrovision Radio.
This week on WASTOIDS TV, saddle up with one of the wildest bands to ever emerge from the Texas underground, the Butthole Surfers.
It was a sort of a rite of passage more than a concert. It felt dangerous. It was like an atomic reaction, you know.
Sit with filmmakers Tom Stern and Simon Weinstein and learn how they got a glimpse beyond the crazy and into the true heart of the band. For their new shock doc,
Butthole Surfers,
the whole truth and nothing but.
The Butthole Surfers are the kind of perfect antidote for the current malaise of the digital, isolated era that we live in.
It's an everything but edition of WASTOIDS TV with a sneak peek of the film. Get lit.
There is kind of a before and after when you wander into a Butthole Surfer show.
Butthole Surfers is what happened when Paul Leary collided with Gibby Haynes.
The greatest live band of my lifetime.
Shout to the angel. Roll back the hands of time.
It invoked everything you knew about Texas, that guns were rampant and it was, you know, the state that wanted to secede from the Union and Texas Chainsaw.
It was about music, but it was also just about letting your freak flag fly.
I was a punk and I wanted to be in a punk band.
I was like, you're gonna guarantee me a floor every night? I was down.
We just felt a connection.
It was great music, but then it was also this kind of avant-garde visual art project.
Texas definitely had an effect on them.
And you were their first projectionist, you mentioned.
Well, if no one else remembers that.
I tore my dresses off and I forgot I didn't have any underwear on.
I'm on 2 fucking hits of acid. I was just like, oh my God, I can't be in here.
I didn't talk for a long time after I put the Buttholes. I was so traumatized.
Just bringing the fucking chaos. I gotta ask some questions about unpleasant shit.
Something clicks inside him, and he'll just go, come on, we're gonna kill him. Like, I can kill anybody, dude.
The relationship between you and Paul changed because you went to LA. Is that fair to say?
I've seen Gibby fucked up out of his mind, but not like that. What I know of them as people makes me think that they are among the worst people I've ever known.
I think he truly is suffering from trauma, but I've never heard him talk about it. Have you?
Please welcome Butthole Surfers.
Butthole Surfers, you'll see.
Just blew my mind.
It's a motherfucker. It's a motherfucker.
Smashed his head against the wall. Smashed his head against the wall. He smashed his head against the wall. He smashed his head against the wall.
The Butthole Surfers are the kind of perfect antidote for the current malaise of the digital, isolated era that we live in, where people are kind of more and more, especially young people, are, you know, spending so much of their lives looking at a little screen and isolating, where the Butthole Surfers, you can't dive into real life much more than they did. You know, they really lived, for lack of a, and it was sort of life as art. You know, their whole day-to-day existence was this sort of art project, you know, that was unbridled, as Thurston said. It was like unbridled id, you know, led by Gibby, who was a bit like a cult leader, you know, in that everybody had to be all in. Like today, you know, people have boundaries, right? You know, you can, like, boundaries became a buzzword in recent years about, like, hey, my own personal life is that and my work life is that, and, you know, you can't cross my boundaries. Well, the Buttholes had no fucking boundaries. There was just, it was total commitment, and, you know, whether they were during a show or during preparing for a show, it was a level of commitment to their art that is kind of hard to fathom these days.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways they kind of they both take you back, at least, you know, as somebody not alive during that time. But for me, they sort of almost, it feels like they predicted, I think, a lot of what's like insane about the internet before it became a malaise, and they sort of predicted what's insane about this digital age, but they brought it to you in a more raw, sort of like crazy, like, you know, they're just really ahead of the curve and just confronting you with everything horrifying that now you could get at a touch of a button, and did it in a way that's even more horrifying than when you press that button nowadays.
Yeah.
You talked about boundaries, Tom, and if you were at a Butthole Surfers show, you might get soaked in some weird way. You might see something that you could never have imagined. You might experience something. You know, the discomfort is inherent to the act, and it's a part of it. And what results from that friction is maybe not everybody's cup of tea, but certainly something that's so much more experiential than what people are used to.
Yes. It was a full sensory experience, tactile, you know, sort of a rite of passage more than a concert. It felt dangerous and transgressive, you know, taboo breaking and barrier breaking. And it was just a big, sweaty, heaving mass of bodies, but also anchored by not only this kind of amazing visual spectacle, but a great music soundtrack, you know. The thundering double drummers and Pincus's, you know, Flea calls it rubbery groove. They had this rubbery groove. And then Paul Leary always keeping the rhythm, you know, and such a great guitar player. And he talks about his right hand being the key to it. Like his left hand was doing what it did, but the right hand never lost the groove, you know. Yeah. He was chunking those power chords out, and it had that appeal of, you know, that Black Sabbath-y kind of, what am I thinking? Riffage, yeah.
Yeah, big time.
So it had that, it had the power of riff rock, but then the power of like a rite of passage ceremony.
Yeah. Like an initiatory experience. Yeah.
They were good at writing pop songs, and they were good at structure, and they were good at hooks and melodies and songs that you want to hear. And it makes the crazy transgressive avant-garde stuff, you know, stand out more. You know, Barbecue Pope is such a crazy song with such crazy, you know, riffs, but it's, you know, that melody in the chorus is still, it's like real infectious. They did a good job of packaging that avant-garde, you know, tribal stuff and making it really just something you actually want to hear and put on.
Yeah, in some ways, I actually think that's why, you know, when they do break into the mainstream with Pepper, on one hand, there's a part of me that goes, how could this band of all bands ever have been swooped up into the major label machinery? And at the same time, Pepper's a hit song. It's definably a pop hit. They didn't swerve into that lane and all of a sudden they were doing something that had hooks. Those were baked in from sort of the beginning.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that's Paul Leary's musicality. He's just a real musical genius. And he, you know, was raised on the Beatles, who are the ultimate kind of pop melodic geniuses. So that came through, even though he was heavily influenced by sort of punk and post-punk dissonance.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask about the title of the documentary because it's brilliant. Was that something you guys settled on early on, or was that a finishing touch?
You know, it's funny. That's Gibby's coinage.
Yeah.
and Gibby, when I first was a fan and hanging out with Gibby after I befriended him, he gave me this Xerox collection of press clippings, and that was the title. He'd done a collage on the front that said Butthole Surfers, you know, the whole truth and nothing but. And well, actually, it was just the whole truth and nothing but. It didn't say the name of the band. But he is a great wordsmith. His brain is a word blender that pulls pop culture references and, you know, Hairway to Steven, Electric Larryland. He has a real knack for that. And so the thing is we agonized. It wasn't set. It was we're agonizing about what to call a film. And one early thing I thought was it's got to have the name of the band in it, just for practical reasons. And it's a great name. But what else can we put in there? And we tried and had a lot of different ideas, but we just couldn't beat Gibby's coinage because it's hard to beat him.
Was it important to you guys to sort of make sure that this one didn't fit the cookie cutter mold as far as a film itself?
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's Tom. He was the sort of master of that, making sure that it was not typical and making sure that, Tom always said that you feel like you're at one of their shows.
Yeah, I wanted it to be in the spirit of the band, and the band was always experimental. It was never conventional. There were sort of, as I started it, I'd never done a music documentary, and so I didn't really know how to do it, but I sort of, my very first ideas were like, what don't I like about most of these music docs? And let's not do that. Yeah. So what I didn't like was a lot of talking heads, of just watching people reminisce. Visually, it's boring. I wanted to cover up those talking heads with interesting visuals in the spirit of the band. And I wanted a lot of music. The reason we love this band, the music, like it becomes a challenge, I will say, because I was always pushing, and so was Simon. We were always pushing more music. But, you got to tell the story. You can't have lyrics competing with voiceover. But I think we ended up getting it pretty good in that sense. There's a lot of music. When you see the credits at the end, there's 50 songs. And we sneak them in between scenes and underneath dialogue, but those are my two big ones.
Tom was really good at picking the poppiest, hookiest kind of ones from the early days, because their first album, it opens with a pop song of Hey, and Tom was really good at finding those. But I think what helps too is this band is so cinematic. They could do a soundtrack to a movie where there's so many good songs that you want to sing along to, and music from every era of the band, where it's we have of course all the Peppers and Who Is in My Room, but we also include the 22 Going on 23 for 5 seconds, and Pittsburgh to Lebanon early on, especially the instrumental parts where you can really hear Paul shine. And I think it really is a soundtrack that they did. It's the super almost borderline ambient stuff they would occasionally throw out.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that it sort of functions in this weird way as like a mixtape in addition to a film. Tom, you first started kind of like documenting the Butthole Surfers nearly 40 years ago, right? It was 1986?
86, yeah. So, well, that's a couple months away, right? Because it was in February, too. Yeah. So it really is close to 40 years. I was a film student at NYU. I checked out a camera from my video production class, and it was like an old 3/4 inch video camera with like a shoulder pack. And I stood 2 feet from the stage in CBGB's on a chair against the wall. And, the maelstrom, the mosh pit was like always like pushing me, and I'm like, whoa, So you can see that when like they kick into a moshable section of a song, you see the camera get rocked,
I don't suppose you told the people you were checking the camera out sort of what danger you might be potentially putting it in?
No, I didn't.
It's really good footage because it's Paul wearing, he was wearing pants that were made out of shower curtains.
Black and white, swirling psychedelic pants with green paint on his body.
You can see everything going on. Paul gets electrocuted.
Yeah, I'm right there. I'm 2 feet from the stage, which makes it, kind of also a metaphor for what made those shows so exhilarating was the proximity. And what Jeff Pincus says in the later part of their career, he got disillusioned because they were playing big festivals all the time. And there's like security guards and like 50 feet from the stage to a barrier. So you lose the proximity, and that's a big part of it, that breaking down of audience and performer, the barrier between that was literally being so close that you felt sweat when they whipped their head, the sweat hit your face, and, it's powerful. It's a visceral experience.
A band this sort of anarchic, it must have been a little daunting to try to figure out what sort of shape you were going to kind of put over this narrative. How did you kind of crack that egg?
As Chris Kirkwood said, in the opening title, the Butthole Surfers were what happened when Paul Leary collided with Gibby Haynes. It was like an atomic reaction. These two creative molecules kind of came together and formed this compound that couldn't have existed unless they met each other.
Yeah.
And so their relationship was the core of it. So I knew early on that's what I wanted to focus on. And I discovered early on it was going to be difficult, especially from the Gibby end of things. Paul was kind of remarkably open about it.
Yeah.
But Gibby's not. He doesn't like to talk about their relationship. Like, everybody's talking about everything except Gibby doesn't really talk about the intimate stuff because he's a showman and he always reverts to the funny showman persona. And that fights against intimacy and emotional vulnerability.
Part of the allure of the band is that they were shrouded in this mystery, and then does this film kind of ruin that, shroud of mystery, or it kind of gives me what I want. I'm like, I want to know what the hell is wrong with these people and what's up with this music, but it does sort of, like you get a peek through that shroud. But
a big part of the power was the mystique and the lack of information, and then a documentary is necessarily, by its very nature, going to destroy that. It's two different kinds of emotional power. Like, mystique fills you with like, oh my God, who are these guys? I want to know more. And then that's a good setup for actually telling you more. Mm-hmm. And that's plays to the power of a documentary is depicting something and then explaining it. It plays to the power of what movies can do. Movies make you laugh, they make you cry. So like, if you can do one that does both of those things, we did it. I'm proud to say, we did a movie that I've seen it with audiences over and over at festivals, and people laugh and people cry, and that they tell me that afterwards. So, and the Butthole Surfers, for all their transgressive, comedic, abstract, expressionistic, artistic stuff, there is a lot of emotion that comes through also in Gibby's lyrics. Sometimes the lyrics are funny, but a lot of the time they're profound and full of emotion and trauma. And, even that first pop song that we open it with, Hey, the lyrics are quite profound and powerful.
Right. I think real good art somehow can be all those things at once. It's not just one thing. And I think that that's sort of what you're getting at here, which was that, these guys could be, they could seem like deranged lunatics, but with big hearts who wanted to talk about the human experience, which is also deranged. So, it all makes sense.
And part of that, the way we made the film, by turning them into cartoon like puppets, the puppets were like the cartoon version of them, so that we can depict the experience on multiple levels. I wanted to iconify them as cartoons, because it's sort of compelling and gives you something to easily grab onto. Paul Gibby's the insane one who's a pyromaniac. And so each time we introduce the character, we show the puppet version, and then, it segues into the flesh and blood version, which is more nuanced and emotionally complex, So I thought that turned out to be an effective technique.
The sort of legacy of Texas Mavericks, from Rocky Erickson to Daniel Johnston to these people who really kind of broke the mold. Do you feel like they are a Texas band in a sort of tradition of strange Texas music? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, Westerns, Texas. It's such a huge part of the American mythology, right? And full of contradictions. It's the scary part, the gun maniacs, and it is about the threat of violence, right? That compels us. But Texas is also a kind of maverick state, as you say, the one that really does celebrate individualism, to positive and negative, ends. But to me, it was also like the Texas Chainsaw mystique which loomed over my childhood. You know, it's just like, whoa, it's scary down there. It's full of maniacs with chainsaws. You know, that had a power to it. And it's funny that we show Texas Chainsaw. There's a scene from the perspective of the blonde girl who's tied up in a chair, and then you see her POV of the dinner table she's at with these maniacs, these Texas maniacs. And one of them looks a lot like Gibby.
Yeah, the hitchhiker looks a lot like Gibby. I've always felt that hitchhiker's very, even down to wearing a necklace that's made out of bones and a green T-shirt. I'm like, that seems like something Gibby would do.
And tension is good for art.
Yeah. It's something Gibby talks about, just randomly walking around gas stations and some dude pulling up in a car, giving them the look and stuff. But it's something it feels like they were almost kind of like aware of it, but really did not care. And were just sort of like, you look at like a band, when they went to New York, everybody there was scared of Butthole Surfers. So it's like, wow, these guys are scary in New York. Imagine like, wow, they are down in like Texas.